final thing that I want to say, which I found very, very interesting. I came across a recent article. So apparently what had happened was they said while maintaining a tropical marine aquarium, we noticed that 3 small colonies of the scleractinian reef corals. So scleractinian corals are those corals that actually build coral reefs. Not all corals are of that type. There are some corals that are what we call soft corals, such as the ones that I have in my tank. I don't have any of the hard corals, the ones that actually form reefs. They're much more difficult to maintain. The soft corals are a lot easier. But what they found anyway was that they had a scleractinium reef coral, Lobophilia hempricii, and this was on the tank's sandy bed. And every night they would notice, they would actually see that this thing was moving. They actually, it moved as much as 6 to 16 centimeters during the night. Now it's not normal for corals to move. They don't really have a mechanism for moving. So what they found was that they would put these things in one part of the tank, and then every night these corals would be moved to the same location, and they were actually attached by a glue-like substance to a fist-sized lump of reef coral that was covered by coralline algae. So the coralline algae is also producing the calcium carbonate. 2 colonies were stuck to the side of the rock about 2 to 4 centimeters above the sandbed. So what these authors did, which I found this to be very amusing, was they thought, well, we're going to photograph this, we're going to take a movie of this. So they tried to take movies of it using very, very low light. And they found that if there was any light at all, apparently these corals didn't move. But sometime during, when they tried to do it with intermittent light and darkness, they found that the corals always moved, or almost always moved. And during a 30-day period, 21 out of the 30 days, they found that the corals had moved between 6 and, as I said before, between 6 and 16 centimeters. So what they eventually wound up doing was to photograph this under infrared lighting. So it turned out that they realized that whatever was moving this apparently didn't like light, and they couldn't see it because it was completely dark. But in the infrared, whatever was moving it, they figured they'd be able to see it, and they were right. And it turned out that what was actually moving these corals was a kind of worm, and this worm is called a Eunicid worm. And the worm was actually not very large. I actually looked at their photograph here, and the worm seems to be about 4 centimeters in length. Now this 4-centimeter worm, which probably weighed less than a gram, was schlepping this 10-gram piece of coral, and it kept moving the same piece of coral. Every time they moved it back, the worm did not want it there, so the worm actually took this thing and dragged it over to this other piece of rock. The worm was actually trying to use this as a, I guess the worm was actually using this as some kind of habitat. But every time and the worm is also capable of producing some calcium carbonate, and it also has this, was actually gluing these things down so that they would actually stick into places where normally the coral would just have fallen off, like it would actually stick to the side of a rock or of another piece of coral. So they now believe that these worms may be very, very instrumental in actually getting coral colonies to start growing. So this is an interesting little thing. And this was only discovered about 10 years ago and was reported in the journal Nature. So I find this to be an interesting development in how coral colonies are actually might be initiated. That you need to have some kind of a substrate that you can stick these things onto, but maybe they're actually being assisted by other creatures, such as these Eunicid worms. Eunicid, by the way, is spelled E-U-N-I-C-I-D. Okay, so that's all I really want to say today.